Hey, how's everybody doing this evening? My name is Corey Moore, aka Corey Stones, and I want to have a quick video this evening about revenue. And, you know, this is a topic that really bugs the living shit out of me. If you want to know my honest opinion, excuse my language. But everybody that I know, everybody that I talk to, they always want to talk about revenue. Revenue, revenue, revenue. As if revenue is this magic word or this magic heal all, right? And really, what are they talking about when they talk about revenue? They're talking about how much money they're making or how much money their company is making, right? Whether it's yearly revenue or monthly revenue or whatever. And there's this mindset that I've picked up on that more revenue is automatically better, right? That's not necessarily the case. One of the things that I've done over the course of my career is I've always been self-invested, right? I haven't really gone to investors. I haven't really gone to other institutions or other players to get money for my businesses. I've self-funded those through things that I've done, right? From saving, from working, or whatever. I've used the money that I've had and I've earned myself to invest in my businesses. And so my goal by doing that is to try to stay lean, right? And to keep the business operations as lean as possible, right? So that you don't have this massive amount of overhead and that all this revenue that you're gaining is going to pay for your overhead. When you can keep the business operations lean and you can still be lean and still make money, then you have an opportunity for growth while continuing to stay lean. And there's a balance there, right? Because if you want to build and grow your company, then you naturally have to invest in that company, right? Which costs money. And if you want more revenue, right, you have to grow that business. Well, so gaining more revenue also costs you more money to sustain that level of growth and that level of operation to make that amount of revenue. So it's a pretty simple concept when you look at it that way. It's obviously easier to talk about in this discussion than it is to actually apply in the real world, right? Because as you're growing and as your business is growing, then you have more revenue coming in, but that more revenue coming in can require more capital to sustain that level of operation. And so I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys on revenue, right? Because revenue means absolutely nothing if you aren't making profit, right? So if you have $1 million in revenue and you have $1,001 in expenses, then you just lost money. You may have $1 million in revenue, but you don't have any money in the bank and you just lost money, right? Because your expenses, your overhead, your operational costs are more than the revenue that you're bringing in. And so that's an important concept to understand because there's this emphasis on growth. There's this emphasis on hiring more people, the emphasis on expanding. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? You may have heard those concepts. Right? Those are all important things to apply and understand. But at the end of the day, it's very important to understand that keeping operations and keeping business fundamentals and structures lean and as lean as possible while still sustaining growth and still making money is going to be a much safer, more sustainable route over the long course, right? Because how many times have you heard of these companies that they grow really, really fast? And then they go out of business, right? Well, there's a reason that happens, right? And they grew too fast. They had too much growth that required a lot of revenue and capital to maintain that operation, to sustain that growth, that they didn't have the cash flow to do it, right? And so talking about that, I wanted to kind of clarify my thoughts because I talk to so many people about revenue. It's not something I do. You will never, ever, 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 ever hear me talking about revenue for any of my companies or for anything for that matter, unless it's a stock pick or something like that that we're trying to evaluate in that regard, a publicly traded company or something like that. I don't think it's information that's healthy for a discussion because it comes out as oh, my truck's bigger than yours. You know, these silly childish conversations about, oh, my suit costs more than your suit. I don't care. I don't give a damn. At the end of the day, I don't care. I'm not working to compete with the price of your suit or the price of your revenue. My business isn't in competition with your business, right? The only person that I'm in competition with is myself. So how can I improve what I'm personally doing? The other part of the conversation with revenue that I personally don't like is revenue typically refers to one thing, right? When you're talking about how much money you made in the year, you might refer to that as your earnings, right? Or my earnings last year were X, Y, and Z, right? So earnings are more of how much is a person worth. Revenue has a tendency to be more specific to a company's earnings in a monthly or a yearly reporting basis, right? So for me, I've always been diversified. I've never really had one way of making money. I've had all several different kinds of ways of making money. My wife has kind of been the same way. And so when I hear about revenue, I don't necessarily think of one company, right? I think of more of my earnings, right? My earnings are more important than my revenue for one particular company. So it's an interesting way of looking at that question or talking about that topic. I personally choose not to talk about revenue, but a lot of people that I know talk about it and talk about it until they're blue in the face. If you ever see me in a conversation like that, I immediately shut down and move on to something else because I'm not interested in talking about money as much as I'm interested in talking about things that make you successful, right? I'd rather hear about the things that made you successful, education, strategies, tactics, opportunities, than you talking about how much money you made, right? It's not something that's appealing to me. So when you're thinking about business or when you're thinking about revenue or you're thinking about the topic or, hey, this guy that I know, he's a successful businessman. He always wants to talk about money. He always wants to talk about revenue. Hopefully that perspective and that insight that I gave you and that I shared with you will be another point of reference that you can have on a way to discuss revenue without discussing revenue, if you understand what I'm talking about. So hopefully that's a good perspective for you. Again, guys, my name is Corey Moore, aka Corey Stones. If you like what you heard, if you like what you've seen, please click subscribe, be a part of my YouTube community. I've been slacking lately on the videos, guys, and I apologize. I've had a lot going on with work, with kids, with my wife, with family. It's just busy. And I'm not making excuses, but I apologize. So stay on me, guys. So click subscribe, stick around. Look forward to seeing you guys. Have a great night.